Please welcome Graeme Pearman.
The work that I'll summarise really comes out of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, although I'll say a few things about what's happened since their last report last year. And this slide really summarises some of the key messages. The first is that the planet has warmed, and it's very likely that is greater than 90% that is due to these gases. I wanted to put this slide up to emphasise that this community does not say that we know for certain about anything. It's very difficult to be absolutely certain about anything. But we have to manage the risk that we have a high probability that this is right, and the magnitude of the impacts, if it is right, are so large that the risk is very big. And that's what we're really managing. It's not about trying to wait until we're absolutely certain about every component of the climate change issue. It's very unlikely, in the view of the science community, that is less than 5%, that what we're seeing is natural. And it's likely that warming will continue through this next 2 decades at a rate of about 2/10 of a degree Celsius per decade, and that we will see much more change this century than we actually saw through the last century. This slide I put up simply because some of you will have been exposed to some of the newspaper articles recently about the fact that the planet's cooling. Well, go and check this for yourself. You don't have to depend on some of these newspaper articles. This is just something you can download tomorrow from the Bureau of Meteorology's website, looking at Australia's average temperature over the last 100 odd years. And if that looks like it's cooling, well then there's something wrong with my eyes. This is the same. You can look at the NASA website and look at the Globe. You can look at the UK Meteorological Organisation's website. There are data sets, but of course we also have data that are collected from satellites, from balloons, from the surface of the ocean, and even in the deep ocean, and that says nothing of the fact that we have proxy observations like the planet is actually deglaciating because it's warmer. The sea level's gone up because the water's expanded. So we've not come to this conclusion on the basis of one little hairy bit of data. There's a huge volume of information about this particular change. So projections based on the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change using climate models, and there are now 23 of these around the world, show that we're anticipating warming over the next 30 years or so, similar to what took the last century to get, with warming of somewhere between 2 and 4 degrees through this century. That might not sound like much, and I want to point out in a moment why that is actually quite a significant change. But to the average person who, when we go outside tonight, will experience much bigger changes than that, it's not immediately obvious why a change of these magnitudes is important. But it might also be extreme temperature changes that are more important for some of us, or for some of the nations, or for some of the sectors of individual nations as we go out. Or it might be precipitation. We're anticipating a decrease in the subtropics regions, an increase in the tropics as a general rule across the planet. But it's extreme precipitation also we're anticipating will change. We're expecting a change in the intensity of tropical cyclones and in fact of all low pressure systems as they run across water, because they derive their energy from the vapour that is evaporated, and there's more of it in a warmer world. And we're expecting mid-latitude storms to become more intense. There are other things that we're not so certain about. We don't actually know for sure whether the El Nino frequencies will increase and whether they'll become more intense, but they'll be superimposed on what will be, in some parts of the world, a warmer and drier climate. We're not as certain about what will happen to monsoons as we are, for example, for the frontal systems across the southern part of Australia. So within the data and the information we have, there's a range of certainties and uncertainties in what we can say. We do anticipate deglaciation to continue through this century with impacts on snow and ice distribution and, as a consequence of that, on sea level. And we're expecting impacts on the carbon cycle and therefore the rate at which the real world out there, the physical world, can take up the carbon that we're putting into the atmosphere. On average, these models show us this kind of pattern through this century. The warming is not equal. It's quite unequal across the planet, with more warming towards the poles and less in the equatorial regions. The rainfall, and this is just the pattern for the world for our winter. The blues here are where we have the higher the blue colour, the higher the confidence we have from the modelling that we will have an increase in rainfall. And the yellow to red areas are where we have increasing confidence that we will have decreasing rainfall. And there's no surprise to those of you who look at this that the deserts area, the lower mid-latitude areas of the planet, are where we're expecting a loss of rainfall, which is the main problem for Australia, but it's not the only country that will experience this. Other countries will experience this. And the little red stars that you may or may not be able to see in this rather fuzzy diagram are where we have a high degree of confidence in these projections at different parts of the world. But since the IPCC reported, I want to point out that a lot of new information is available.